Okay, this lesson we're going to talk about law of cosines. Once again, we are focusing on non-right triangles. And what happens if you don't know a little letter and a big letter that are the same? Then that means you can't use the law of sines, so you have to have a different way. So that's why they came up with the law of cosines. And for the law of cosines, we have two different formulas. We have one that is for angles, and we have one that is for sides. I'm going to start with the sides first. So if I want to find little a, it says little a squared equals little b squared plus little c squared minus 2 times b times c times cosine of big A. Now, what if you wanted to find little b instead of little a, or little c instead of little a? Okay, let's go ahead and write down what the formulas would be for that one. If I was trying to do little b here, so b squared. Okay, then you would have the other two sides. So that would be little a squared plus little c squared minus, and then it's always 2 times the two sides you added together, which is a and c, times the cosine of the angle that matches who you're solving for. So we are solving for b, so we would use angle b. Okay. Little c squared would equal the other two sides, so a squared plus b squared minus 2 times the sides we added, which are a and b, times cosine of the angle that matches the letter we're solving for, which is c. Okay, so now let's talk about angles. Now remember, if we're talking about angles, we are going to have to hit the inverse button. So I would start by doing cosine to the negative first, and then I would insert these blue parentheses. Okay, if I wanted to do B, I'm sorry, we should probably look at the formula for A. So on my calculator, I would do the inverse of cosine, open a parentheses for the entire fraction, and then open a parentheses for just the top. And on the top, you're going to add the two other sides together. So little b squared plus little c squared minus, you always minus the side that matches the angle. So minus a squared, close my parentheses, divided by, on the bottom, open my parentheses, 2 times the sides you added together, which is b and c, close my parentheses, close my parentheses. All right, so if I'm going to do angle B, so I got cosine, and then I'm going to open my parentheses, and I got a fraction, open my parentheses and the fraction. Okay, other two sides. So that would be a squared plus c squared minus, you always minus the side that matches the letter. So b squared. Close my parentheses. On the bottom, it's always 2 times the sides we added together, which are a and c. And then close. Okay. So for angle C, I'm going to do the inverse of cosine. And then I'm going to add the other two sides together. So little a squared plus little b squared. Always subtract the side that matches the angle. So minus little c squared. And then 2 times the sides we added together. And then close all my parentheses. All right, so let's go give it a whirl. All right, I know angle A is 115 degrees. I know little b is 15 degrees. Or sorry, not 15 degrees, just 15. And I know little c is 10. Now, you can tell with this problem, there's no way I could use the law of sines because the only angle I know is A and I don't know little a. So that's when you're saying, okay, I got to do law of cosines. And which law of cosines do I do first? Well, if you're going to find an angle, that requires you to know all three sides. We do not know all three sides, so therefore we must figure out little a. So here's my formula. Little a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of a. So now let's go plug in. So a squared equals 15 squared plus 10 squared minus 2 times 15 times 10 times cosine of 115. All right, so type that in directly into your calculator as it looks. So little a squared would equal 451.8. And then to get from a squared down to a, we're just going to square root it. And when I square root it, I get little a to be 21.3. Okay. Now that I know all three sides, I can find an angle. Doesn't matter which angle we find first, B or C. I'm just going to choose angle B. So if I want to set it up for angle B, I'm going to start with the inverse of cosine because it's an angle. And then I'm going to open my parentheses. And then I'm going to open another parentheses for the top. And it's going to be little a squared, which is 21.3 squared, plus little c squared, which is 10 squared, minus little b, which is 15 squared. So remember, you always minus the side that matches the angle. So since we're finding angle B, we will subtract little b. Okay, close my parentheses for the top, open another parentheses for the bottom, and it's 2 times the sides we added together, which are 21.3 times 10. Close your parentheses for the bottom, and then close your parentheses again for the entire fraction. And when you type that into your calculator, I get angle B to be 39.5 degrees. And then finally, we get to go back to, hey, if I know two angles, I can do 180 minus minus to find the third angle. So for angle C, I would do 180 minus 115 minus 39.5. And angle C would be 25.5. And there I have my three answers. Done. Now, the other type of problem you have for law of cosines is when you just know all three sides. You know zero angles. So little x is 14. Little y is 15. And little z is 10. Okay, so we can pick any angle to start with. I'm going to start with angle X. So remember, for an angle, we're going to do inverse of cosine. Open my parentheses. Open my parentheses. Okay. Add the two sides that are not X's. So that would be 15 squared plus 10 squared. And you always subtract the side that matches the angle. Since we're doing this for X, we're going to subtract 14 squared. And on the bottom, we're going to do 2 times the two sides we added together. So Type that one into your calculator. And make sure you come up with angle X to be 64.5 degrees. Okay. Now, I'm going to go and do another angle. So I'm going to pick angle Y. And for angle Y, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to do the inverse of cosine because it's an angle. And then remember, you got to subtract little y because you always subtract what matches the angle. So therefore, that means we're going to add the x and the z. And on the bottom, it's times the x and z. Okay, so type that in, and we get angle y to be 75.3 degrees. Then we get to go 180 minus 64.5 minus 75.3. So angle Z is 40.2. But wait, just like everything, there's always two different ways you can do the problem. So let's say after we found angle X, then some students will look at me and they'll say, oh, well, Ms. Meyer, we now know little x and big X. So could I switch to the law of sines? And the answer is, why, yes, you could have. So right here, oops, I'm going to say, or, and let's pretend like we didn't want to do the law of cosines again for an angle. So if I wanted to switch back to the law of sines, then I would say, okay, little x is 14 over sine of big X, which is 64.5, equals little y, which is 15, over the sine of big Y. Now remember, if you're trying to find an angle, you got to do inverse. So you can do sine to the negative first. Cross multiply where you know both. So 15 sine of 64.5. And divide that by 14. So if I go over to my calculator and I type this in, exactly how it looks, then I come up with angle Y to be 75.25, which would round to 75.3. And then you're going to notice it's the exact same answer I got with doing the law of cosines. So in some of the problems, you could be able to switch back and forth at a certain point between the law of sines and the law of cosines. That's it.